I'm for I don't, they can do whatever they want. We'll give them everything. Sure, I would. Let the Senate look at it. Let anybody look at it. But don't talk about it too much.
This all come down to the Epstein files, and that is shocking. And, you know, I stand with these women.
My people want to know who else, if anyone, did Epstein traffic young women to?
Dogs don't bark at parked cars, and we are winning.
In a social media post on Sunday, the president said the House Oversight Committee could have any documents that they're legally entitled to, and then declared in all caps, quote, "I don't care," end quote. Just 3 days prior, he had said that Republicans focused on Epstein were, quote, soft and foolish.
Okay, so something absolutely massive just happened in the Epstein files case that the mainstream media is barely covering. And when you understand what this federal judge just did and what it means for Pam Bondi and Donald Trump, you are going to understand why this story is so explosive, why certain people in Washington are desperate to keep it buried. A federal judge has now ordered expedited processing of a lawsuit demanding the Justice Department hand over internal records about how Pam Bondi has been handling the Epstein documents, and the judge did not mince words about why this matters. She explicitly said there are possible questions about government integrity and that these records could reveal whether Bondi misled the American people about what was actually in those files and why the DOJ suddenly reversed course on releasing them. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Senator, as Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full review by the FBI, agents, and DOJ prosecutors. They found no credible evidence of any wrongdoing.
And that was not my question. My question was, what became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI delivered, evidently in a paper bag, to Mr. Homan?
Senator, I'd look at your facts.
Are you saying that they did not deliver $50,000 in cash to Mr. Homan?
Senator, as recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full review
different question.
by the FBI agents,
That's a
by
different
Department
question.
of Justice prosecutors. They found no evidence of wrongdoing.
That's a different question. What became of the $50,000? Did the FBI get it back?
This is huge, folks, and I need you to pay very close attention to what is happening here. Remember when Bondi went on television and bragged that she had the Epstein client list sitting right there on her desk and that more releases were coming soon? Remember when Trump signed the Epstein Files Transparency Act with great fanfare, promising the American people would finally learn the truth about who was involved with Jeffrey Epstein? Well, something very strange happened after all those promises. The DOJ suddenly changed its position. An FBI memo appeared out of nowhere, concluding there was no basis to revisit disclosure of certain materials. The promised releases got delayed and watered down, and now a federal judge is saying, hold on, the public deserves to know what happened behind the scenes to cause this reversal. And here's the part that should make everyone sit up and pay attention regardless of their political views. The judge specifically noted that the FOIA request targets communications about why DOJ walked back its position, and she pointed out that this reversal happened only after Bondi reportedly told Trump that his name appeared in the Epstein files. Let me say that again so it really sinks in. According to the court ruling, there are serious questions about whether the Justice Department changed course on releasing these documents specifically because the Attorney General informed the president that he was mentioned in them. That is not some conspiracy theory from anonymous internet posters. That is a federal judge saying in an official court order that this is a legitimate question of public concern that deserves expedited investigation. Think about what that would mean if it turns out to be true. The Attorney General of the United States, the person who is supposed to be the chief law enforcement officer serving the American people, may have altered her department's handling of explosive documents specifically to protect the president from embarrassment or worse. That would be a fundamental betrayal of her oath of office and her duty to the public. That would be using the Justice Department not to serve justice, but to serve the personal interests of one man. And a federal judge has now said there's enough reason to believe this might have happened, that the public deserves fast access to the internal records that could prove or disprove it. But wait, it actually gets even worse for Bondi and Trump when you look at the bigger picture of what is happening with the Justice Department right now. Senators have fired off an oversight letter revealing that Trump has filed 2 administrative claims at the DOJ seeking approximately $230 million in taxpayer money. You heard that right, $230 million that Trump wants the government to pay him over past investigations he claims were unfair. And guess who controls whether those claims get approved or rejected? Pam Bondi and the Justice Department she runs. The senators are warning about an inescapable conflict of interest and demanding documents about how her office plans to handle those claims ethically when her boss stands to personally benefit from the decisions. So let me just lay out what we are looking at here in plain terms that everyone can understand. We have an attorney general who promised transparency on the Epstein files and then reversed course after reportedly telling the president his name was in those files. We have that same attorney general now facing a court order to turn over internal communications about why that reversal happened. We have the president seeking $230 million from the department that attorney general runs. And we have senators warning that the whole situation is riddled with conflicts of interest that make it impossible to trust that justice is being served rather than presidential interests. This is exactly the kind of corruption and self-dealing that people across the political spectrum should be outraged about. The Epstein case involves allegations of horrific crimes against children and young women. The victims and the public deserve to know the full truth about who was involved. And instead of getting that truth, we are watching what looks like a cover-up in real time, where documents are being suppressed and reversed and delayed specifically to protect powerful people who may have been connected to Epstein's criminal enterprise. The judge in this case, Tanya Chutkan, is the same judge who has been handling some of the most important Trump-related cases. She is not known for making frivolous rulings or ordering expedited processing without good reason. When she says there are possible questions about government integrity and that the public deserves to know if the attorney general misled them, that carries real weight. This is a serious jurist looking at serious evidence and concluding that something does not smell right about how the Justice Department has been handling these files. So today, I am going to break down exactly what is in this court ruling and what it means for Bondi and Trump. I am going to explain the $230 million conflict of interest that makes this whole situation even more corrupt. And I am going to show you why this Epstein documents fight has become a test case for whether the Justice Department serves the law or serves the president. All right, so let me walk you through exactly what happened with this court ruling and why it matters so much for understanding what is really going on with the Epstein files and whether the American people are ever going to get the full truth about who was involved with Jeffrey Epstein's criminal operation. Because this is not just about documents and FOIA requests and legal procedures. This is about whether the Attorney General of the United States has been lying to the public and manipulating the release of evidence to protect the president from accountability. Let us start with what Pam Bondi actually said and promised about the Epstein files, because understanding her public statements is essential to understanding why the judge found the FOIA request so compelling. Back in February 2025, Bondi went in front of cameras and made a very specific claim. She said there was a discrete client list from the Epstein case and that it was sitting on her desk ready to be released. She talked about phase 2 releases that were coming soon. She created the impression that the Justice Department was committed to full transparency and that the public would finally learn the truth about everyone connected to Epstein. And then something changed. A few months later, an FBI and DOJ memo suddenly appeared concluding there was no basis to revisit disclosure of certain materials. The promised phase 2 releases got delayed. The full transparency that Bondi had bragged about turned into something much more limited and controlled. Documents that were supposed to come out stayed hidden. The public got drips and drops instead of the flood of information they had been promised. And nobody in the Justice Department would really explain what happened or why the position had changed so dramatically. This is where the FOIA lawsuit comes in. Democracy Forward, a legal organization that files transparency lawsuits, submitted a Freedom of Information Act request demanding internal DOJ records about what happened. They wanted emails and memos and communications that would show why Bondi's department reversed course on the Epstein releases. They wanted to see what conversations happened behind closed doors that led to this dramatic change in position. And critically, they wanted correspondence between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein that might be in DOJ possession. Normally, FOIA requests take forever to process. The government can drag its feet for months or even years, citing various exemptions and workload issues and bureaucratic delays. But Judge Tanya Chutkan looked at this request and said, no, this one needs to move fast. She ordered expedited processing, which means the DOJ has to prioritize getting these records together and responding to the lawsuit much more quickly than they normally would. And the reasons the judge gave for ordering expedited processing are absolutely damning for Bondi and the administration. Chutkan explicitly stated in her ruling that there are possible questions about government integrity at stake. She said the documents could reveal whether Bondi misled the American people when she claimed there was a client list on her desk. And she specifically noted that the reversal in DOJ's position happened only after Bondi reportedly informed Trump that his name appeared in the files. The judge is basically saying this looks really bad and the public has a right to know what actually happened as quickly as possible. Now let me explain why the timing issue matters so much, because this is the heart of the potential scandal. If the Justice Department changed its position on releasing Epstein documents for legitimate legal reasons, like discovering that certain releases would compromise ongoing investigations or endanger witnesses, that would be understandable even if disappointing. Government agencies sometimes have to balance transparency against other important interests, but that is not what appears to have happened here based on the timeline and the evidence that prompted the judge to order expedited processing. What appears to have happened, and again, this is what the judge found credible enough to warrant fast-tracking, is that Bondi was initially gung-ho about releasing everything. She went on TV and bragged about the client list on her desk. She made promises about transparency, and then she had a conversation with Trump where she reportedly told him his name was in the files. And after that conversation, suddenly the DOJ position changed. Suddenly there was no basis to revisit disclosure. Suddenly the promised releases got delayed and scaled back. If that sequence of events is accurate and the judge clearly thinks there is enough evidence to investigate, then what we are looking at is the Attorney General of the United States altering her department's handling of a criminal case specifically to protect the president from having his connections to Epstein exposed. That is not just a conflict of interest. That is not just bad judgment. That is potentially obstruction of justice and certainly a betrayal of the public trust at the highest levels of law enforcement. But the Epstein file situation does not exist in isolation. It is happening at the same time as another scandal involving Bondi and Trump and the Justice Department that makes the conflict of interest even more glaring and corrupt. Senators on the Judiciary Committee have revealed that Trump has filed 2 administrative claims at DOJ seeking approximately $230 million in personal compensation. He wants taxpayer money to pay him for what he claims was unfair treatment during past investigations. Think about what that means for the integrity of the Justice Department under Bondi's leadership. The president has a direct personal financial stake in decisions that her department makes. He wants $230 million. She controls whether he gets it, and at the exact same time, she is making decisions about whether to release documents that could embarrass or implicate him in the Epstein matter. The senators who wrote the oversight letter used the phrase inescapable conflict of interest and demanded documents about how Bondi's office plans to ethically handle Trump's compensation claims when she reports directly to him and he stands to benefit personally from her decisions. This is Banana Republic stuff, folks. This is the kind of corruption you expect to see in failed states, where the government exists to enrich the ruler rather than serve the people. The Attorney General controlling documents that could implicate the president while simultaneously controlling whether he gets $230 million from the department she runs. There is no universe where that is acceptable or ethical or consistent with the rule of law. And media organizations and advocacy groups are starting to connect these dots publicly. They are pointing out that the combination of Trump's pressure to weaponize the Epstein files against his political enemies, remember, he wanted to investigate Democrats' ties to Epstein, combined with Bondi's shifting promises on transparency, and now the judge's FOIA order has turned this whole situation into an open court test of whether the DOJ is being used to shield the president instead of serving the public. The question is not just whether we will get the Epstein documents. The question is whether the Justice Department has become a tool of presidential protection rather than an institution of law enforcement. All right, so let us break this whole situation down into the key points you need to understand about what is happening with Pam Bondi and the Epstein files and why this represents such a serious threat to the integrity of the Justice Department and the rule of law in this country, because this story is complicated with a lot of moving parts, but the core issues are actually pretty simple once you strip away the legal jargon and bureaucratic procedures. Point number 1 that you absolutely need to understand. A federal judge has explicitly stated there are possible questions about government integrity and how the Justice Department has handled the Epstein files and has ordered expedited processing of a lawsuit to get to the bottom of what happened. This is not partisan speculation or conspiracy theorizing from anonymous internet accounts. This is Judge Tanya Chutkan, a respected federal jurist, looking at the evidence and concluding that the public has a right to know whether the Attorney General misled them about what was in the Epstein documents and why the DOJ reversed course on releasing them. When a federal judge uses language like possible questions about government integrity and orders fast tracking of a transparency lawsuit, that means something serious is going on that deserves investigation. Point number 2. The court ruling specifically notes that the DOJ reversed its position on releasing Epstein documents only after Bondi reportedly told Trump that his name appeared in the files. This timing is absolutely crucial to understanding why this situation looks so corrupt and suspicious. Bondi went on television bragging about the client list on her desk. She promised transparency. She talked about upcoming releases. And then she had a conversation with Trump about his name being in the files. And then suddenly the position changed. Suddenly there was no basis for disclosure. Suddenly the promises got walked back. That sequence of events suggests the reversal was about protecting Trump rather than serving any legitimate legal interest. Point number 3, Trump has filed claims at the Justice Department seeking approximately $230 million in personal compensation, which creates an inescapable conflict of interest for Bondi, who controls both those claims and the Epstein document decisions. The Attorney General works for the President. The President wants $230 million from the department she runs. She is simultaneously making decisions about documents that could embarrass or implicate him. There is no way to ethically navigate that situation. The conflicts are baked into the structure itself. Senators have demanded documents about how Bondi plans to handle this, but the fundamental problem is that she cannot be an impartial decision maker when her boss has so much riding on her choices. Point number 4, Bondi made specific public claims about having an Epstein client list on her desk that the FOIA lawsuit now seeks to investigate as potentially misleading the American people. She did not speak in vague generalities. She said there was a discrete client list. She said it was on her desk. She created expectations of transparency and full disclosure. And then the releases that actually happened were much more limited than what she described. The judge found this discrepancy significant enough to warrant expedited investigation. If Bondi lied to the public about what documents existed and what she planned to release, that is a serious breach of her duty as Attorney General and could form the basis for ethics complaints or even impeachment. Point number 5, this situation feeds into broader concerns that the Justice Department is being weaponized to protect Trump and his allies while targeting his political enemies. Trump wanted to use the Epstein files to investigate Democrats he claims had ties to Epstein. He wanted probes into his political opponents. But when it comes to documents that might implicate him, suddenly the DOJ finds no basis for disclosure. That is 2 different standards of justice operating simultaneously. One standard for Trump's enemies where everything gets investigated and released. Another standard for Trump himself where documents get suppressed and promises get walked back. That is not how the rule of law is supposed to work in America. Point number 6, the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and the American public deserve full transparency about who was involved in his criminal enterprise, regardless of their political affiliation or position. This is not about partisan politics. This is about justice for people who were horrifically abused and exploited. Every person who enabled Epstein or participated in his crimes should be exposed and held accountable. When the Justice Department suppresses documents or reverses course on transparency specifically to protect powerful people, they are betraying the victims who deserve answers and accountability. The Epstein case should not be treated as a political weapon to be deployed selectively. It should be treated as a criminal matter where the full truth comes out no matter who it implicates. The bottom line here is that we are watching a potential cover-up unfold in slow motion at the highest levels of the Justice Department. A federal judge has found enough smoke to order an expedited investigation into whether there is fire. The Attorney General made promises she did not keep and reversed course under suspicious circumstances that coincided with informing the President his name was in the files. The President has $230 million riding on decisions made by that same Attorney General. Senators are warning about inescapable conflicts of interest, and the victims of Jeffrey Epstein still do not have the full truth about who was responsible for their abuse. This is exactly what corruption looks like when it operates at the highest levels of government. It does not always come with obvious bribes and smoking guns. Sometimes it comes in the form of bureaucratic reversals and delayed releases and conflicts of interest that somehow always work out in favor of the powerful, while the victims and the public are left waiting for answers that never come. The question now is whether the courts and Congress will force transparency or whether the cover-up will succeed in keeping the truth buried. The judge has taken an important step by ordering expedited processing of the FOIA lawsuit. That means documents could start coming out relatively soon that shed light on what really happened behind the scenes. But the Justice Department will almost certainly fight to keep as much hidden as possible. They will claim exemptions and privileges and national security concerns. They will delay and appeal and obstruct because the people at the top of that department have powerful reasons to keep the truth from coming out, starting with the President himself, who reportedly appears in the very files they are trying to suppress. All right, that is where I am going to leave it for today. This Pam Bondi and Epstein files story is one of the most important and underreported scandals happening in Washington right now. A federal judge has basically said the public deserves to know if the Attorney General lied and if the DOJ reversed course to protect the President. That is extraordinary, and it deserves far more attention than it is getting. Make sure you are subscribed because we are going to keep tracking this case as it develops and the documents start coming out. I will catch you in the next one.